What if the people who win at the highest physical level, the ultra runners, the Navy SEALs, the obstacle course champions, what if they're not actually stronger than you, not actually faster, not actually built differently? What if the people we call superhuman are just the ones who got really, really good at something most of us spend our entire lives trying to avoid? Today, we're going to find out what that thing is and why the woman widely considered the most decorated obstacle racer in history says the secret is hiding inside one sentence she puts on every billboard of her mind. Welcome back. Over the next hour or so, I'm going to walk you through the first part of Tim Ferriss's Tools of Titans, the part Tim simply calls healthy. Now you've probably heard of Tim. He's the author of The 4-Hour Workweek, host of one of the most downloaded podcasts in history, and one of the most relentless self-experimenters on the planet. For years, he's been sitting down with the most successful people alive, Olympic athletes, billionaire investors, 4-star generals, chess prodigies, surgeons, monks, hedge fund managers, comedians, people at the absolute top of whatever world they live in. And then one month, he did something interesting. He flew to Paris, rented a small apartment near the Luxembourg Garden, cut himself off from email and social media, and gave himself one job: to sit with thousands of pages of interview transcripts and try to extract the patterns, to see if there was something, anything, that the world's best had in common. What he came back with wasn't a theory, it wasn't a manifesto. It was a kind of toolkit, a messy, beautiful, chaotic toolkit of habits and tricks and questions and routines, organized into 3 buckets: healthy, wealthy, wise. And the first thing he discovered, the thing that surprised him most, is that almost none of these people got to where they are by being naturally gifted. They got there by quietly, obsessively optimizing the machine they live inside: the body, the mind, the hours of the day, the food on the plate. So today, we're starting with healthy. We're going to meet an obstacle racer who runs in the rain because she knows her competition is opting out. A Dutch madman who can sit in ice water for hours without his core temperature dropping. A neuroscientist who studies what happens when you stop feeding your body sugar entirely. A doctor who reverse engineers his training from the question, what do I want to be doing when I'm 85? A Soviet weightlifting coach who treats strength like a skill instead of a sport. A husband and wife team who train underwater holding dumbbells. And a gymnastics coach whose athletes can hold their entire body horizontal in mid-air using nothing but 2 rings and a single decision they made years ago. By the end of this video, you'll have the actual tools these people use. Not theories, not motivation, the real thing. What they eat, how they breathe, when they sleep, how they train, and most importantly, the patterns Tim found running through all of them like a hidden thread connecting people who otherwise have nothing in common. Let's start with Amelia. Section 1. The pain game. Picture a woman in her early 30s, mud-soaked, blood streaming down her shoulders from barbed wire she's just crawled under. She's been moving, running, climbing, crawling, lifting, swimming through ice water for nearly 24 hours straight. She has covered 90 miles. She has cleared 300 obstacles. And of the more than 1,000 people who started this race, only one person is ahead of her. 80% of those competitors are men. And the only person beating Amelia Boone is going to cross the line just 8 minutes ahead of her. That was World's Toughest Mudder 2012. Amelia is a corporate attorney at Apple. She's a Stanford graduate. By day, she's writing legal documents in an office, and on weekends, she is, as one writer put it, the Michael Jordan of obstacle course racing. More than 30 victories, 50 podium finishes, the only 3-time winner of World's Toughest Mudder in the history of the sport. Now here's the thing. When Tim asked Amelia what she would put on a billboard, what's the one sentence she would want everyone to see, she didn't say believe in yourself. She didn't say follow your dreams. She didn't say anything inspirational at all. She said 5 words. No one owes you anything. Sit with that for a second. Because most of us walk around carrying the opposite assumption, that the world should reward effort, that fairness is a real thing, that if we work hard, good outcomes are somehow due to us. Amelia operates on a completely different operating system. The world doesn't owe her a finish line. Her competitors don't owe her a slow day. Her body doesn't owe her a pain-free race. She has to take it, every inch of it. Tim asked her how she trains, and the answer was almost embarrassingly simple. She runs in the rain. She runs in the cold. She runs in the conditions everyone else opts out of, because she knows her competition is sitting on the couch waiting for better weather, and every miserable hour she puts in is an hour they didn't. She calls it rehearsing the worst-case scenario. Tim has a name for it too. He calls it stoic training. The idea that if you deliberately practice discomfort when the stakes are low, you become indestructible when the stakes are high. There's a story Amelia tells about her early days, back when she was just starting out, about doing unbroken double unders. A double under, if you've never seen one, is a jump rope move where you pass the rope under your feet twice in a single jump. It is brutal on your calves. It is brutal on your shoulders. Doing it once is hard. Doing it 20 times in a row is athletic. Doing it 100 is impressive. Amelia did it 423 times in a row without missing. And do you know why she stopped at 423? Not because her arms gave out. Not because her legs gave out. She stopped because she had to pee so badly that she peed her pants while jumping. And that's the story she tells, without embarrassment, without softening it. Because the point is, she didn't stop. The body did what the body had to do. She kept going. In 2014, Amelia tore up her knee. Surgery, recovery, and 8 weeks later, 8 weeks, she lined up at the world's toughest mudder again, and she won. 8 weeks after knee surgery. How? She used something called a skirg, a low-impact training machine that lets you build cardiovascular endurance without putting weight on your legs. While she healed, she just kept going. While her competitors trained normally, she trained around her injury. And when the gun went off, she was ready. Now, before you say to yourself, okay, but she's gifted, she's wired differently, she's not me, listen to what she actually does. Not the genetic part, the behavioral part. She uses a foam roller called a rumble roller. Tim describes it as a foam roller crossed with a monster truck tire to recover faster. She rolls her foot on a golf ball to release her hamstrings. She uses dry needling for over-tightened muscles. She uses a sauna 4 times a week because sauna exposure has been shown to dramatically improve endurance. A professional cyclist named David Zabriskie used sauna training to win Stage 1 of the Tour de France in 2005, beating Lance Armstrong by seconds. And Amelia uses the same trick. None of these are mystical. None of them require talent. They are tools, and anyone can pick them up. But here's what I think is the real Amelia lesson, the one that goes deeper than the tools. When you ask her what makes her different, she doesn't talk about her body. She talks about her willingness to be uncomfortable, to do the run in the rain when no one is watching, to accept that no one owes her the win, to finish the 423rd jump even when her body is failing in obvious, undignified ways. She's not the strongest. She's not the fastest. She is, as she says about herself, really, really good at suffering. And once you accept that the differentiator isn't talent, it's tolerance for what the rest of us avoid, the world starts to crack open a little. Because suddenly, getting better isn't about waiting for some gift you don't have. It's about doing what's in front of you, especially when you don't want to. Section 2. The body's secret switches. In 2019, Tim Ferriss flew to Malibu to spend a few days training with a man named Wim Hof. If you've never heard the name, Wim Hof is a Dutchman in his 60s who is by any reasonable measure supposed to be dead by now. He has climbed Mount Everest in nothing but shorts and boots. He has run a half marathon above the Arctic Circle, barefoot, in a t-shirt. He is sat for nearly 2 hours in a tube filled with ice. His core temperature, when measured, doesn't drop the way yours and mine would. His immune system has been studied in laboratories because it responds to commands his conscious mind appears to be giving it. He once swam under a sheet of ice in a frozen lake, and his retinas, the back of his eyeballs, actually froze. He surfaced. He warmed up. He kept going. Now, before you write him off as a stunt artist, you should know the scientific community has tested Wim repeatedly. Universities have run him through MRI scans, immune challenges, cold exposure protocols. They have given his blood inflammatory triggers that should make him sick, and he has, through breathing and mental focus, suppressed the immune response. He didn't just sit in cold water, he moved the boundary of what the human body is allowed to do. And the wildest part? He says you can learn it, all of it, or at least enough of it to change your life. His method has 3 pillars: breathing, cold exposure, and focused attention. That's it. No supplements, no special diet, no equipment beyond a bathtub and some ice. Let me describe the breathing exercise because it's hard to believe until you've done it. You take 30 to 40 very deep breaths in a row, full chest inhale, then a relaxed exhale, almost a sigh. After about 20 breaths, your hands start to tingle. You might feel lightheaded, mild euphoria. After the last breath, you exhale completely. And then, empty lungs, no air. You hold. You hold for as long as you can. Tim sat with Wim and did this. Before the exercise, Tim's maximum breath hold was about 45 seconds. After 3 rounds of Wim's breathing, 4 minutes and 45 seconds. Months later, Tim combined the technique with a few other tools: 8 days of fasting, deep ketosis, and a session in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber. He held his breath for 7 minutes and 30 seconds before stopping. Not because he had to, because he was getting scared of what was happening to his brain. Now, and I'm going to say this clearly because I have to, do not try this in a swimming pool. Do not try this driving. Do not try this anywhere you could pass out and hurt yourself. Wim's exercises shut off the body's normal alarm system. That's the entire point of them. But the alarm exists for a reason. If you want to experiment, do it sitting on a soft surface, in a safe room, with someone nearby. Now, what about the cold? This is the part most people associate with Wim, and it's also the part with the most science behind it. Cold exposure, done right, has been shown to do several things at once. It improves immune function. It increases something called brown adipose tissue, which actually burns calories to keep you warm. It elevates mood through a chemical called norepinephrine, and it dramatically increases your tolerance for discomfort, which carries over into every other area of your life. And the best part, you don't need an ice tub. You don't need anything Wim level. Tim's recommendation, and the recommendation of Naval Ravikant, of Josh Waitzkin, of dozens of people in this book, is something almost anyone can do. Make the last 30 to 60 seconds of your shower pure cold. That's it. That's the whole entry-level protocol. Josh Waitzkin, the former chess prodigy who inspired the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer, does this with his young son Jack. He's trained the boy from a very young age to say, out loud, in the freezing water, "It's so good, even when it doesn't feel good, even when it feels terrible," because Josh believes that what you teach your nervous system to associate with discomfort defines who you become. If you want to go deeper, Tim's full routine after a workout looks like this. He sits in a sauna for about 20 minutes. Then he gets into an ice bath, about 40 pounds of ice, water at 45 degrees Fahrenheit, for 5 to 10 minutes. He alternates between the two to 4 times. Heat opens you up, cold seals you back. The combination, done regularly, is one of the most consistent recovery tools used by elite athletes in this entire book. Now, Wim says something interesting about why he does this. He says, "All the problems I have in the daily world subside when I do this, exposing myself to the worthy cold, It is a great cleaning, purifying force, and I want you to notice something there. He's not saying the cold makes him healthier, though it does. He's not saying the cold makes him stronger, though it does. He's saying it makes his problems quieter, because when you put yourself into water cold enough that your body genuinely thinks it might die, you cannot think about your inbox. You cannot think about your taxes. You cannot worry about what your sister said at Thanksgiving. There is no room for any of it. You are entirely, completely, ferociously here. That's what Wim is really selling. Not a cold resistance trick. A way to stop being lost in your own head. One last thing about Wim, because it's small but it stuck with Tim and with me. The first time Tim hugged Wim in person, he noticed something strange. Wim hugs differently. He throws his left arm over your shoulder, putting his head to the right of yours. Most people, being right-handed, do it the opposite way. Tim asked someone on Wim's team if Wim was left-handed. No, they said. He just wants to hug heart to heart with everyone. He just wants to hug heart to heart. This is the man who froze his retinas in a frozen lake. This is the man who broke world records that medical science said were impossible. And what does he want from a hug? He wants your heart to be close to his. That's not a contradiction. That's exactly the point. The toughest people in this book are almost never the coldest. They are almost always the most awake. Section 3. Rewriting Metabolism. Imagine a scientist in his lab in Tampa, Florida. He's a researcher at the University of South Florida, and he's also working with the US Navy on a problem most of us never think about. Navy SEALs, when they dive deep underwater using closed-circuit rebreathers, can have seizures, the kind of seizures that kill you. The Navy wants to know how to prevent them, so they hire Dominic, the 500th Agostino, to figure it out. Now, Dom isn't a doctor. He's not a fitness guru. He's not a wellness influencer. He's a neuroscientist with a PhD, and he spends his days running experiments on rats, on mice, on cells in petri dishes. And what he discovered, almost by accident, is something that's going to change the way you think about food. You see, when the body burns through its sugar reserves, when it's been fasting for a few days, or when it's been eating a diet with almost no carbohydrates, it switches over to a backup fuel system. The liver starts converting fat into something called ketones, small dense molecules that the brain can run on instead of glucose. And it turns out that brains running on ketones don't have seizures. They also, in early studies, don't grow tumors the way brains running on sugar do. Dom's lab work, and the work of dozens of researchers building on it, has shown something that should be on the front page of every newspaper in the world. Many cancer cells are sugar addicts. They have what's called a metabolic defect. They cannot run on ketones the way healthy cells can. So when you put a body into deep ketosis, when you cut the sugar supply almost entirely, the healthy cells thrive on fat. The cancer cells starve. Now, I want to be very careful here. Dom is not saying ketosis cures cancer. He is saying that as a research tool, as a metabolic state, ketones do something powerful, and we're only beginning to understand how powerful. There are ongoing clinical trials. There are case studies. The data is exciting and incomplete at the same time, but here's what Dom himself does. He fasts regularly, sometimes for as long as 7 to 10 days at a time. Not because he hates food, because he's seen in his own blood work what happens to his body when he does it. He'll start a fast on a Saturday. By Tuesday, his blood ketone levels are climbing. By Wednesday, his sense of mental clarity is sharper than it's been in months. By Thursday, he's running stairs, lifting weights, doing things that should be impossible for someone who hasn't eaten in 5 days, because his body has fully switched over. The fat he's carrying is being converted, gram by gram, into clean burning fuel. His brain is on a different operating system, and it's running better than it does on bread and pasta and orange juice. Tim got curious. Tim got more than curious, because that's what Tim does. He decided to try an 8-day fast himself. Just water and salt, no food, For 8 days, he didn't just survive it, he thrived in it. By day 4, his ketones were so high, over 6 millimoles per liter, which is deep territory, that he had what he describes as a feeling of unshakable calm. He'd sit down to work, and the noise that normally clutters the mind just wasn't there. He could read for hours. He could write for hours. At the end of the 8 days, when he combined his fasting state with Wim Hof, breathing in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, that's the breath hold record from the last section, he didn't just hold his breath for 7.5 minutes. He held it without panicking, without the desperate gasping that usually accompanies long breath holds, because his brain was so well supplied with backup fuel that it simply wasn't sending the alarm signal. Now, let me say something important here, because I don't want anyone listening to this and deciding to fast for a week tomorrow. Extended fasting is not for everyone. If you have a history of disordered eating, don't do it. If you're pregnant, don't do it. If you're on medication, talk to a doctor. The people in this book who do these things have years of conditioning behind them. Dom has been studying this for over a decade. Tim has been experimenting on his own body for nearly 20 years. But here's what you can do if you're curious. You can try what's called a 16-8. You eat all your food in an 8-hour window each day. You fast for the other 16 hours. Most of those 16 hours, you're sleeping. So really, you're skipping breakfast and eating lunch a little later. That's it. That's the entry-level version. And almost everyone in this book, almost everyone, does some version of intermittent fasting. Wim Hof eats 1 meal a day, has for decades. Laird Hamilton, the surfing legend you'll meet in a few sections, barely eats breakfast. General Stanley McChrystal, who you'll meet in part 3, 1 main meal a day. Malcolm Gladwell, the best-selling author, same. All of these people, in completely different fields, with completely different bodies, arrived at the same place independently. That's not a coincidence. Tim asks the question in the book that I want to ask you now. Why do we eat the way we eat? Why are we told 3 meals a day? Why are we told breakfast is the most important meal? If you trace it back, you'll find that most of what we believe about how often to eat doesn't come from biology. It comes from cereal companies, from food manufacturers, from 100 years of marketing pretending to be nutritional science. Your body did not evolve to be fed every 4 hours. Your body evolved to handle long stretches without food because that's what our ancestors faced. And when you give it that, when you let it rest, when you let it reach for its own fat stores, instead of constantly being topped up with new fuel, strange and wonderful things happen. Inflammation drops, mental clarity rises, insulin sensitivity improves, cellular cleanup processes kick in, the body, freed from constant digestion, has time to do its other jobs. Dom isn't selling a diet. He's not selling anything really. He's a scientist asking a simple question. What if the way we think about food is wrong? And he's letting the data answer. One last thing about Dom, because it's the part that stayed with me longest. Tim asked him what he eats on a normal day, and Dom described his meals. A lot of fat, very few carbs, eggs and avocados and olive oil and macadamia nuts. But what struck Tim wasn't the food. It was the relationship Dom has with food. He doesn't think about it much. He doesn't worry about it. He doesn't obsess over it, because he stopped using food the way most of us use it. Most of us eat because we're bored, because we're stressed, because it's Tuesday and Tuesdays mean pasta, because we always have. Dom eats because his body needs fuel. That's it. Once you separate eating from emotion, from habit, from boredom, from social ritual, you realize how much of what's on your plate isn't really food at all. It's a coping mechanism. And one of the quiet superpowers of the people in this book is that almost none of them use food that way. They've built a different relationship with hunger. They've stopped treating it as an emergency. They've made friends with empty. Section 4. The Engineer of Longevity. In 1998, a young Canadian man stood in a boxing ring in Calgary, his face swelling, blood in his mouth, and he made a decision. He was good. He was nationally ranked, He had a shot at the Olympics, but he could also see, clearly, sharply, what the next 20 years of taking punches to the head would do to his brain, and he walked away. His name is Peter Attia, and what he did next is one of the most interesting career arcs in this entire book. He went to medical school, trained as a surgical oncologist. That's a cancer surgeon at one of the most prestigious programs in the United States. Spent years operating on dying patients, and then he walked away from that too, because he realized he didn't want to spend his career cutting tumors out of people. He wanted to spend it making sure they never got the tumors in the first place. Today, Peter runs a medical practice focused on something he calls the science of longevity. He has a small number of patients. He charges them a lot, and in return, he doesn't just monitor their cholesterol. He monitors over 100 biomarkers. He looks at the speed of their cognitive decline, the flexibility of their arteries, the mitochondrial function in their cells. His goal is not to keep them alive longer. His goal is something he calls a longer health span. The number of years you live with a body that still works. Because here's the depressing truth most people don't want to hear. The average American spends the last decade of their life in significant decline. Knees gone, back gone, memory fading, independence eroding. Peter's question is, what if we could compress that decline? What if the last decade of your life could look like the middle of it? What if you could die healthy? Now here's the part of Peter's philosophy I find genuinely radical. Most doctors look at you when you're 60 and ask, what's wrong? Peter looks at you when you're 40 and asks, what do you want to be doing when you're 85? He calls this reverse engineering. He asks his patients, when you're 85 years old, what are the activities you want to be able to do? Do you want to pick up your grandchildren? Do you want to play golf? Do you want to hike a mountain? Do you want to lift a 30-pound suitcase into an overhead bin? Whatever your answer is, he then works backwards. If you want to pick up a 30-pound grandchild at 85, you need to be able to deadlift, say 50 pounds at that age, because strength declines steadily over the years, and you need a buffer, which means at 70, you need to be deadlifting 80, which means at 60, 100, which means right now in your 40s or 50s, you need to be deadlifting something like 150 to 200 pounds, not to be impressive, to buy yourself a future. This is a completely different way of thinking about exercise. Most people exercise to look better right now. Peter exercises to preserve a self that will exist in 40 years. He calls his training the centenarian decathlon, 10 physical things he wants to be able to do at age 100, and every workout he does today is a deposit into the account that pays out then. Read that again. Every workout is a deposit into the account that pays out at 100. His program has 4 pillars. Aerobic efficiency, what he calls Zone 2 training, which is basically slow, steady-state cardio where you can still hold a conversation. Anaerobic capacity, the harder intervals that push your heart rate to its ceiling. Strength training, and not just any strength training, but the lifts that preserve bone density and muscle mass. And mobility, the often ignored discipline of being able to move your joints through their full range. Most fitness culture tells you to pick one. Are you a runner? Are you a lifter? Are you a yoga person? Peter says, wrong question. The body needs all of it. Aerobic without strength leaves you frail. Strength without mobility leaves you stiff. Mobility without cardio leaves you weak. The point is the whole package. And then there's sleep. Peter is obsessive about sleep. He uses sleep trackers, sleep masks, mouth tape, blackout curtains, cold rooms. He believes, and the data is increasingly clear here, that sleep is the single most important biomarker of longevity, more important than diet, more important than exercise, because sleep is when the body actually repairs itself. Tim was sitting at dinner with Peter one night, and Peter described what he calls his sleep hygiene routine. Hours before bed, no screens. The bedroom is kept at 65 degrees Fahrenheit, sometimes colder. He uses a device called a chili pad, a water-cooled mattress topper, to keep his sleeping temperature even lower. He tracks his heart rate variability. He tracks his deep sleep minutes. He treats sleep like an Olympic athlete treats training, because that's exactly what he believes it is. If you take one thing from Peter's whole approach, take this: treat sleep like it matters. Most of us treat sleep like it's the thing we sacrifice when life gets busy. Peter treats it like the thing he protects when life gets busy. One of these mindsets builds a body that lasts. The other one builds a body that breaks. There's a question Peter asks his patients that I want you to sit with for a second. He asks, if you could see yourself 10 years from now, looking at the choices you made today, what would you wish you had done differently? That's the question that turned a 35-year-old cancer surgeon into a longevity researcher. That's the question he asks every patient who walks into his office. And it's a question almost no one asks until it's too late to act on the answer. Most of us walk through our 40s, our 50s, even our 60s, treating health as something we'll deal with eventually. As if there's some signal, some moment of obvious decline that will tell us when it's time to get serious. There isn't. The decline doesn't announce itself. It just shows up one morning when you can't bend down to tie your shoe, when you can't climb a flight of stairs without resting, when the knees go and the back goes and the energy goes, and you realize that the body you have is the body you chose 20 years ago when you weren't paying attention. Peter's whole life is built around one idea, that aging is not something that happens to you. Aging is something you negotiate with every single day through the choices you make, and the earlier you start negotiating, the better terms you get. Section 5. The Guided Missile. Picture a man in his 50s standing in a converted warehouse in Northern California. He's not big, he's not bulky. He looks like an ordinary guy you'd pass on the street. He has a shaved head and a thick Russian accent, and he's holding a piece of iron that most strong men in the building would struggle to lift off the ground. He picks it up like it weighs nothing. His name is Pavel Tsatsouline, and if you've ever heard the word kettlebell, if you've ever seen one of those black iron balls with a handle on top sitting in the corner of a gym, there's a very good reason for that. Pavel is the man who brought kettlebells out of the old Soviet Union and into the West. He's the man who taught Navy SEALs, FBI agents, Secret Service, and ordinary Americans that the way they'd been training for strength was, in his words, completely backwards. Pavel grew up in the Soviet system. He was trained as a physical conditioning instructor for Spetsnaz, Russia's special forces, and in that world, strength wasn't a hobby. It wasn't something you did for an Instagram photo. Strength was a survival skill. Weakness was dangerous. The training had to work every time for everyone, because the alternative was a soldier who couldn't carry his wounded brother off the field. So when Pavel started working with American athletes, he was genuinely confused by what he saw. Americans in the gym were exhausting themselves. They were grunting, they were sweating, they were lifting until they couldn't lift anymore, then collapsing on the floor in a puddle. And Pavel watched all of this, and he asked a question that nobody had really asked before. What if strength is a skill? Sit with that for a second, because everything in American fitness culture treats strength like a sport. You go to the gym, you compete with the weight, you try to dominate it. Pavel said, no, strength is more like archery, or playing piano, or learning a language. It's a thing you practice, gently, consistently, without ever exhausting yourself, because exhaustion teaches the nervous system the wrong lessons. He has a phrase he uses constantly: be a guided missile, not a shotgun. A shotgun fires a wide spread of pellets, hoping that some of them will hit. A guided missile finds the exact target and hits it once, perfectly. Pavel says that's how strength training should work. Most people in the gym are shotguns. They do 12 different exercises. They do 4 sets of 15 reps. They go until failure. They wake up the next morning so sore they can barely walk. And they get marginally stronger maybe over the course of a year. Pavel's athletes do the opposite. They pick 1 or 2 lifts. They do them with perfect form. They stop well before failure. They train almost every day, but each session is short, and they get dramatically stronger, sometimes doubling their strength in months, without ever pushing themselves to the point of suffering. His core principle is called grease the groove. The idea is that strength is a neurological skill, your brain learning to recruit more of your muscle, more efficiently, on demand. And the way you build that skill isn't by hammering it once a week to exhaustion. It's by practicing it many times a week, lightly, the way you'd practice scales on a piano. Want to do 20 pull-ups? Pavel's protocol isn't to do 3 sets of pull-ups twice a week until you collapse. His protocol is to do a few pull-ups, well below your maximum, several times a day, every day. You walk past a pull-up bar in your kitchen, 3 reps. You walk past it on the way to the bathroom, 3 reps. By the end of the day, you've done 30 pull-ups, none of them remotely close to failure. And over weeks, your maximum starts climbing in ways that twice a week to exhaustion training never produces. Tim has applied this to his own training. He's used Pavel's methods to dramatically increase his deadlift, his pull-ups, his pressing strength, all while training less than he used to. One of his favorite techniques is something called the kettlebell swing. It's a deceptively simple movement. You hinge at the hips, you let a kettlebell swing between your legs, and then you snap your hips forward, sending the bell up to about chest height, using nothing but the muscles in your posterior chain, your glutes, your hamstrings, your lower back. Pavel calls the swing the king of all exercises. He says if you could only do one movement for the rest of your life, this would be it, because it trains the muscles most modern humans have completely abandoned, the muscles on the back of the body, the ones we sit on, the ones we crush every time we hunch over a laptop. And it trains them through a power movement, which means it builds not just strength, but explosive capacity. The thing that lets you sprint to catch a bus, or pick yourself up off the ground after a fall, or hold a young child without your back screaming. 200 swings a day, broken into small sets, will change your body within a month. But the deeper Pavel lesson, the one that goes beyond kettlebells and Russian special forces, is this. Most of us have been taught that progress requires suffering, that if you're not exhausted, you're not training hard enough, that if you don't hate the workout, it's not working. Pavel quietly destroys this assumption. He shows that the opposite is true, that the people who get the strongest are the ones who treat training like a meditation, calm, repeatable, focused, never desperate. There's something almost spiritual about how Pavel describes his philosophy. He talks about strength the way a Zen master might talk about tea ceremony. Slow down, breathe, pay attention to the form. Stop trying to dominate the weight. Let the weight teach you what it has to teach you, and come back tomorrow once you start training this way. And I want you to actually try this, because reading about it is not the same as doing it. You discover something strange. You start to enjoy training, not the way most people pretend to enjoy it, gritting their teeth through hour-long sessions. You actually enjoy it, because you're not destroying yourself anymore. You're practicing, and practice, when you're doing it right, feels good. Pavel has a quote in this book that I keep coming back to. He says, "Strength is having the choice. Strength is having the choice." Think about that. Most of us, when we're weak, don't realize what we're giving up. We don't realize that being weak means saying no to the hike, no to picking up our kids, no to the staircase, no to carrying the groceries from the car. Strength isn't about lifting heavy things in a gym. It's about the entire menu of things you're allowed to say yes to in your life. Every kettlebell swing Pavel teaches is a vote for a future self with more choices, not a future self with bigger muscles, a future self with more freedom. And the best part is, you don't need to be a Navy SEAL to do this. You don't need to spend 3 hours a day in a gym. You need 10 minutes. A few times a day, done with focus, done without ego, done like a guided missile, not a shotgun. Section 6. Going first. On a beach in Malibu, before dawn, 2 figures are walking down to the water. One of them is a man in his 50s, 6'3", weighing about 220 pounds of lean muscle. He's barefoot. He's carrying something that looks like a dumbbell. The other is a woman in her 40s, 6'3" herself, a former professional volleyball player, also carrying a weight. They walk into the ocean together. They keep walking. The water reaches their knees, their waists, their chests. They keep walking until they're completely underwater, and then they start working out. Laird Hamilton is widely considered the greatest big wave surfer in the history of the sport. He's the guy who surfs the waves that other surfers run from. 40-foot walls of water in Tahiti, 60-foot monsters at Jaws in Hawaii. The waves that, if you fall, can crush your lungs against the reef. Gabby Reece, his wife, is a 3-time member of the US national volleyball team, a model, a broadcaster, and one of the most charismatic athletes of her generation. Together, they've built one of the most unusual training systems in modern fitness. They train underwater, holding weights, while their lungs are screaming for oxygen, because Laird figured out decades ago that the ocean is the best teacher he's ever had. You cannot panic underwater. You cannot rush. You cannot fight. The moment you do, you drown. So every workout they do under the surface is by definition a training session in staying calm under pressure. Tim trained with Laird and Gabby. He describes their pool routine, a circuit of squats, lunges, presses, and walks, all done with 5 or 10 or 20-pound dumbbells, all done while submerged in 8 feet of water. You take 1 breath, you go down, you complete the movements, you come up, you take 3 breaths, you go back down, and over weeks of doing this, your lung capacity expands, your CO2 tolerance climbs, your nervous system learns to slow itself down on command. But what stayed with Tim about Laird and Gabby wasn't actually the workouts. It was something Gabby said about her marriage. Gabby has a phrase she uses constantly. 2 words, go first. Here's what she means. Most of us, in any relationship, with a partner, with a friend, with a coworker, wait. We wait for the other person to apologize first. We wait for the other person to be vulnerable first. We wait for the other person to make the move, to show their cards, to be the one who breaks the silence. Because if we go first, we might look weak. We might be rejected. We might be wrong. Gabby says no. In her marriage, she has made it a rule. She goes first. If something is uncomfortable, she names it first. If an apology is needed, she offers it first. If affection has gone quiet, she initiates first, because she's noticed something that took her years to figure out. The person who goes first has all the power. Sit with that, because it's counterintuitive. We're trained to think that vulnerability is weakness, that whoever cares less wins, that the person who waits has the leverage. Gabby thinks the opposite is true. The person who is willing to be vulnerable first, the person who is willing to be wrong first, to apologize first, to soften first, that person sets the temperature of the entire relationship. She tells Tim a story about a fight she and Laird had early in their marriage. It was bad, the kind of fight that puts a wall between 2 people, and she could feel them both retreating to their corners, and she made a choice. She walked across the room. She said, "I love you. I don't want to fight." And the wall came down. Now, that's not weakness. That's strength of a kind most of us don't recognize. Because going first, when you don't have to, when no one's making you, when you could just sit in your anger and be right, that's the rarest discipline in any relationship. Tim has applied this to his life beyond his romantic relationships. He goes first in difficult conversations with business partners. He goes first in apologizing to friends. He goes first in saying the awkward thing that needs to be said. And he's found over and over again that the people on the other side don't punish him for it. They thank him for it, because most of them were waiting for someone to go first too. But back to the training, because there's one more thing about Laird and Gabby worth sharing. Laird has a concept he calls the sauna stack. He believes that heat exposure, used regularly, is one of the most underused longevity tools in the world. We talked about it briefly with Amelia in section 1, But Laird takes it further. He sits in a sauna for 30 minutes a day, not occasionally, daily, sometimes longer, and he's been doing this for decades. The science behind it is now catching up with what he intuited. Studies out of Finland have shown that men who sit in a sauna 4 to 7 times a week have dramatically lower rates of heart disease, lower rates of dementia, lower all-cause mortality. The data is stunning. Why? Because heat is a stressor, a controlled, mild stressor that the body adapts to in the same way it adapts to exercise. Heat shock proteins get released, inflammation drops, cardiovascular function improves. Even the production of growth hormone, which crashes after we leave our 20s, gets a temporary spike from sauna use, a bathtub of ice, and a wooden box that gets hot. That's it. That's the protocol. No supplements, no subscriptions, no app required. What's striking about Laird and Gabby isn't any one thing they do. It's the philosophy underneath all of it. They both believe, deeply, completely, that the modern world has stripped us of the small daily stresses our bodies were designed for. We're too warm, we're too well fed, we sit too much, we never get our hearts truly pumping, we never get truly cold, we never get truly hot, we never hold our breath, we never carry heavy things up hills, and the body, without these inputs, starts to break down, not from too much stress, from too little of the right kind. Laird's training is, in a way, an attempt to give the body back what civilization took from it. The cold, the heat, the breath holds, the heavy lifts in unstable environments, the discomfort. And the body, when you give it these things, rewards you with a level of vitality most people in their 50s and 60s don't believe is possible anymore. There's a phrase Laird uses that I want to leave you with from this section. He says, "The ocean does not care about your feelings. The ocean doesn't care if you're tired. It doesn't care if you're scared. It doesn't care if you don't feel like training today." And once you accept that, once you build a relationship with something that genuinely doesn't care about your excuses, you stop making them. Not because you've become more disciplined, but because there's no one left to listen to them. Section 7. The single decision. In a small gym in Colorado, a coach watches a teenage boy attempt to do a pull-up. The boy struggles. He gets his chin to the bar, barely, once. The coach nods, makes a note on a clipboard, and walks over to a corner of the gym where 2 wooden rings hang from straps attached to the ceiling. He grabs the rings. He pulls himself up, and then, with no apparent effort, he extends his entire body until he is holding it perfectly horizontal in mid-air, arms straight, legs straight, body locked into a position the human body is not supposed to be able to hold. He's parallel to the floor. He's 6 feet off the ground. He's smiling. His name is Christopher Sommer. They call him Coach Sommer, and he is the man who turns ordinary teenagers into world-class gymnasts, the kind of athletes who win Olympic medals, the kind who do things with the human body that look like special effects in a movie. Tim went to train with Coach Sommer for one reason. He wanted to fix his back. After years of training the wrong way, too much weight, not enough mobility, Tim's body was breaking down in his late 30s, and Coach Sommer was the man other elite athletes pointed to when their backs gave out. What followed was one of the most humbling training experiences of Tim's life. Coach Sommer doesn't lift weights. He doesn't use machines. His entire system is built around what gymnasts call bodyweight strength, using your own mass with extreme precision in positions that demand total integration of every muscle. And what Tim discovered as a 40-year-old man who could deadlift over 500 pounds was that he couldn't do the basic exercises Coach Sommer gave to his beginner students. He didn't have the wrist mobility. He didn't have the shoulder stability. He didn't have the core control. He was strong in one narrow direction. He was fragile in every other direction. Coach Sommer made him start over, like a child. But the real lesson, the one that became one of Tim's favorite ideas in the entire book, wasn't about gymnastics. It was something Coach Sommer said in passing, almost as a throwaway comment. Tim was asking him about his approach to training young athletes, how he gets 11 and 12-year-old kids to commit to the years of discipline required to become world-class, how he gets them through the boring days, the painful days, the days when they want to quit. And Coach Sommer said this: "I don't make small decisions every day. I made one big decision years ago." The single decision. Tim asked him to explain. Coach Sommer described it like this: most people try to live by willpower. They wake up each morning and they negotiate with themselves. Should I work out today? Should I eat the donut? Should I skip the run? Should I have one drink or two? And every one of those negotiations costs energy. Every one of those choices wears them down. By the end of the day, they've made 1,000 small decisions, and most of them have been bad ones because their willpower ran out somewhere around lunchtime. Coach Sommer's gymnasts don't operate this way. He trains them to make one big decision, to be a world-class gymnast, and then to let that one decision make all the small decisions for them. Do you eat the candy bar? You don't ask. The single decision already answered it. Do you sleep until 10? You don't ask. The single decision already answered it. Do you skip the training session? You don't ask. The single decision already answered it. All the small choices are downstream of the big one, and the big one only has to be made once. This is one of the most powerful ideas in Tools of Titans, because most of us are exhausted and we don't know why. We think we're tired from work. We think we're tired from our commute, but a lot of what's actually draining us is the constant low-grade negotiation we run with ourselves all day long. Should I do this? Should I do that? Is now the right time? Am I being too strict? Am I being too lazy? Every time we relitigate a choice we've already supposedly made, we lose a piece of ourselves. Tim applies this to 1,000 areas of his own life. He doesn't drink alcohol on weekdays. That's not a daily choice. That's a single decision he made years ago. He doesn't check email before noon. Single decision. He doesn't take meetings on Mondays or Fridays. Single decision. He's not constantly evaluating these things. He's already evaluated them, and the freedom he gets from not having to think about them is the freedom to focus on the things that actually matter. You can do the same thing with your health. Right now, today. Pick one. Pick one single decision and make it for the next 90 days. I will walk 30 minutes every morning. That's the single decision. I will not eat sugar on weekdays. That's the single decision. I will do 10 kettlebell swings every time I make coffee. That's the single decision. Notice what happens. Within a week, you stop arguing with yourself. Within a month, the behavior is automatic. Within 90 days, it's part of who you are. And then, and only then, you can stack another single decision on top of it. One big decision will quietly outperform 1,000 small ones every single time. Coach Sommer's gymnasts don't have more willpower than the rest of us. They have less daily negotiation. They've taken the choice off the table. And what they've discovered, what the strongest, healthiest, longest living people in this book all seem to know in one form or another, is that freedom doesn't come from having endless options. Freedom comes from the choices you no longer have to make. One decision, made once, lived out every day after. That's not deprivation. That's the most peaceful kind of power there is. The patterns Tim found. Now, before we close, I want to do something a little different. Because we just walked through 7 of the most fascinating people in the healthy section of this book. An obstacle racer, a Dutch ice madman, a neuroscientist who fasts for days, a cancer surgeon turned longevity engineer, a Soviet strength philosopher, a surfer and his volleyball player wife, a gymnastics coach who turns boys into birds. On the surface, these people have nothing in common. They live in different countries. They train in different ways. Some of them eat 1 meal a day. Some of them eat 6. Some lift weights, some don't. But Tim was looking for the pattern underneath, the hidden architecture, the things that show up no matter what version of healthy you're chasing. And he found them. 5 things. Let me walk you through what they are. The first pattern. More than 80% of the people in this book have some form of daily mindfulness or meditation practice. Not as a religious thing, not as a spiritual flex, as a tool. They sit quietly. They watch their breath. They notice their thoughts for 10 or 20 or 30 minutes a day. And they treat this as non-negotiable. The way you treat brushing your teeth, the way you treat eating dinner. Why? Because they've all figured out, in their own way, that the quality of your day is determined by the quality of your attention. And attention is a muscle. It atrophies if you never train it. Most of us go through life with completely untrained attention. We are pulled by every notification, every craving, every fleeting impulse. The people in this book have, in one form or another, trained themselves to choose where their attention goes. The second pattern. A surprising number of these people, especially the men over 45, barely eat breakfast or skip it entirely. Wim Hof eats 1 meal a day. Laird Hamilton barely touches morning food. General Stanley McChrystal, who you'll meet in part 3, eats 1 main meal a day. Malcolm Gladwell, same. Tim himself most days drinks coffee in the morning and waits until lunch. This flies in the face of everything we were taught growing up. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Eat 6 small meals. Never skip breakfast. But the people Tim interviewed have arrived, independently, at a different conclusion. The body works better when it spends more hours not digesting. Mental clarity is sharper. Energy is more stable. Inflammation drops. You don't have to follow them. You don't have to skip a meal you love. But notice the pattern. It's there for a reason. The third pattern. Almost every guest in this book has been able to take an obvious weakness, something that should have stopped them, and turn it into their biggest competitive advantage. Arnold Schwarzenegger was told he was too foreign, too muscular, too thickly accented to ever be a movie star. He used all 3 to become the most successful action star in history. Amelia Boone wasn't fast or genetically gifted. She was a corporate lawyer who started racing in her late 20s. She turned that into being the most decorated obstacle racer alive. Robert Rodriguez, the filmmaker, had no money, so he learned to make movies with almost no budget and built an entire career on it. The pattern is so consistent that Tim now looks for it deliberately. Whatever your obvious disadvantage is, your accent, your background, your missing credential, your physical limitation, the thing you wish you could hide, that thing is almost certainly the seed of your competitive advantage. You just haven't learned how to plant it yet. The fourth pattern. These people all believe, deeply, repeatedly, that failure is not durable. That's a phrase from the filmmaker Robert Rodriguez, but it shows up everywhere in this book. The idea is simple. A failure is an event, not an identity, not a permanent state. You can fail today and start over tomorrow with no asterisk on your record. The only failure that sticks is the one you let define you. Most people walk around carrying their failures like luggage. They tell themselves stories. I tried that diet and it didn't work. I tried to start a business and it failed. I tried to run a marathon and I quit. And those stories become their ceiling. The people in this book do not collect failure stories. They collect data. They try things. Some work. Most don't. They keep moving. Failure is not durable. It's an experiment that gave you information. Run the next one. And the fifth pattern. The fifth one is the quietest, but maybe the most important. Almost everyone in this book has at some point deliberately exposed themselves to discomfort, voluntarily. Not because they had to, because they understood that comfort, when it becomes the default, is a slow poison. Cold showers, long fasts, long runs, heavy weights, difficult conversations, hard meditation retreats, sleeping on the floor, skipping meals, taking on impossible projects. The form changes from person to person, but the principle is the same. The body and the mind are systems that adapt to whatever they're exposed to most often. If you expose them only to comfort, they become fragile. If you expose them to small, regular doses of discomfort, they become strong. This is the deepest thing the healthy section of this book has to teach. It is not that healthy people have figured out how to avoid pain. It is that healthy people have figured out how to make pain their teacher. So those are the 5 patterns. Daily meditation or mindfulness. Eating less often than you were taught to. Turning your weakness into your advantage. Treating failure as temporary data. And deliberately exposing yourself to discomfort. If you took nothing else from this video, if you forgot every name and every story I just told you, and you implemented just those 5 things, your health would be transformed within a year. But I hope you don't forget the names, because the names are where the soul of this book lives. Closing. We started this hour with a question. What if the people who win at the highest level aren't actually stronger than the rest of us? Not actually faster? Not actually built differently? What if they just got really, really good at something most of us spend our entire lives trying to avoid? I think by now you know the answer. The thing the world class are good at. The thing Amelia and Wim and Dom and Peter and Pavel and Laird and Coach Sommer all share is the willingness to lean into discomfort instead of away from it. To run in the rain, to sit in the ice, to skip the meal, to do the boring lift, to go first in the conversation, to make the single decision and stop negotiating with yourself. And what they get in return, what every one of them gets, is a body that works, a mind that's quiet, a life that doesn't feel like it's slipping through their fingers. They've stopped trading their long-term self for their short-term comfort. And once you stop making that trade, everything changes. So here's the question I want you to sit with after you turn this off. If you had to pick one single decision, one to make tonight, that you would carry with you for the next 90 days, what would it be? Not 5 things, not a complete overhaul. One, the thing you know in your gut would change everything else if you actually did it consistently. Make that decision tonight. Make it once. Then go to bed and start tomorrow. If you want to go deeper on any of these people, and you should, because each one of them deserves their own book, The Full Tools of Titans is available on Amazon and on Audible. I'll leave links in the description. Tim's audiobook is read by him personally, and the way he tells these stories with his own voice adds a layer the print can't capture. It's one of the best audiobook investments you'll ever make. But that's only part 1. We covered the healthy section. Tim has 2 more parts waiting. In part 2, he turns to wealthy, and that's where we meet a billionaire investor who bought a cabin in the mountains so he could stop taking coffee meetings, an Austrian bricklayer who became a real estate millionaire before Conan the Barbarian, and a Silicon Valley founder who asks the most uncomfortable interview question I've ever heard. That video is on the channel. If you found this valuable, if even one of these ideas landed, hit subscribe. I read every comment, and I'd love to hear which one of these 7 people stuck with you the most. There's no wrong answer. Tim wrote in the introduction that he wanted every reader to love a different 10% of the book. The fact that we'd all pick different favorites, that's the whole point. Until next time, take care of the body that does the work. Nobody else is going to.